laps and roses, whiskers on kittens, white copper kettle, warm woolen mittens, brown paper packages tied up with string. These are a few of my favorite things. Cream-colored ponies and crisp apple strudels, doorbells and sleigh bells and schnitzel with noodles, wild geese that fly with the moon on their wings. These are a few of my favorite things. Girls in white dresses with blue satin sashes, snowflakes that stay on my nose and my lashes, silver white winters that melt into spring. These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, simply remember my favorite things. And then
One day my mother said, we got to go to Bellevue to get George. I'm like, what do you mean? Why do we have to go to Bellevue? Well, they accused him of throwing stuff out the window. I'm like, what did he throw out the window? I don't know. They didn't tell me. They said, George is at the cycle ward at Bellevue. So I said, okay. The only person that would go is me and George, because I have a brother and a sister. They didn't want to come. I'm like, this involves the whole family. It's just me and my mother. And by then, my father had passed away, so my mother was the only parental person that could go. So we went there. George came out in pajamas. I said to him, George, what happened? Well, you know, I kind of flipped out from the flashback, and I thought I was having nightmares about Vietnam.
Yeah.
So, lucky he wasn't in jail for being, a violent criminal, a violent psychopath, because he had a flashback. And the other story which needs to be added to that is the night George came into my room before that and strangled me with a towel.
Okay.
And he did not even remember doing that. I thought he was going to kill me. He said he thought I was a Viet Cong.
And at this, you're what, 13 at this time period?
Around that young age. So George said, he apologized. He felt terrible. He's like, I'm sorry, I was having a flashback. So I told him, didn't they treat you for that? He's like, no. When you came back, they did nothing. He's like, no. I was supposed to go back to civilian life, like everything's okay now.
We had been really chasing a phantom, if you will, an illusion. Chasing a phantom, if you will, an illusion. A phantom, if you will, an illusion. An illusion. We had been really chasing a phantom, if you will, an illusion. That the human mind was more capable of manipulation from the outside by outside factors than it is. We found out that the human being, is an extremely complex thing. There were no simple solutions. Chasing a phantom, if you will, an illusion. A phantom, if you will, an illusion. An illusion.
The human mind.
He said he thought I was a Viet Cong.
And at this, you're what, 13 at this time period?
Around that young age. So George said, you know, he apologized. He felt terrible. He's like, I'm sorry, I was having a flashback. So I told him, didn't they treat you for that? He's like, no. When you came back, they did nothing. He's like, no. I was supposed to go back to civilian life, like everything's okay now.
So now, to me, to jump in, it reminds me of some of the gifts that George gave you.
I mean, wonderful gifts.
One, introducing you to the village.
Yeah.
And also you mentioned
My
that
favorite things.
there was a moment where perhaps there wasn't support when you were younger.
Never
but,
was support.
But George was someone
Me and George, that's it.
George came into your room and said, you go,
Yeah. One day I was crying. I mean, I was just couldn't take it because.
and this is
at
when
that
you were very
point-
young.
Yeah,
We're jumping
very
around
young.
a little bit.
Yeah. I have two brothers. They were both older than me. The other one is Bob. He's younger than George, older than me. He used to beat the crap out of me, punch me in my stomach. My mother was locking me out of the house sometimes. I was getting bullied at school. And my mother was flipping out because my father was dead. And she couldn't handle it. And no one was stepping in to stop it. George was the only one that stopped it. He came into my room, and then I remember him and Bob, which is my other brother, they would have a screaming match in Garden City in the house. It's like a stairs that go up to the second floor.
Yeah.
And my brother would say, oh, you're a loser, you're a drug addict, and George had threatened to kick the shit out of him. He's like, you touch Rich one more time, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. That's the only way that stopped. George had to threaten to kick the shit out of him. Because my mother wouldn't do anything. My mother just would not intervene in anything. She would always take Bob's side.
And from what I understand,
That's why me and George, and why his death was so horrific for me. That's why me and George became very best of friends. And
well, I guess for
brothers.
me, beyond
best of
just
sense.
beyond just that, what I think was kind of maybe struck home more with me was that he actually came in and said, "What's wrong?"
Right.
He actually sat down
Yes.
to speak with you, which
Yeah.
didn't seem to be beyond the violence or beyond
Yeah.
that maybe wasn't available to you in
that
other
was
ways,
nowhere available.
which seemed to be a powerful.
Yeah, that's the only thing that kept me sane. Not psychiatric drugs, not the psych ward, not special ed. It was George.
Yes.
Just a simple, kind words
Yes.
from a loving brother.
Yes.
That's why his death, to tell a story, is not easy for me.
No, I understand.
I'm not
and I
crying,
appreciate
but
it.
I'm crying
No, I
inside.
understand that. So, and thank you, because you shared this with me, and that's why I feel,
And I thank you for
you know,
thinking it's worth telling the world, because I think George is worth telling the world.
so now you shared with me that you, maybe could you go into methadone and heroin?
Sure. Ever since George came back to Vietnam, he would go to the hospital. I'm like, what is that orange stuff in the bottle that you always bring home? And I didn't know anything about that. But George said it was methadone. I'm like, what is methadone? So he said, they give this to me so I don't do heroin. I'm like, wait for the ambulance. Isn't that just another drug to replace another drug? He's like, yeah, that's all it is. Because getting off of heroin and methadone is just the same.
Yeah. Could you just say that because the ambulance was going by?
Yeah,
so,
sure.
so he said methadone was simply a drug to replace heroin.
Yeah. And I said, well, isn't that just another drug to replace another drug? He's like, yes. And it says, well, they claim I won't go and do heroin if I take this. I'm like, yeah, but the effects of the methadone will be just as harmful as the heroin. It just will have different effects, but they both will be dangerous. Because it rots your teeth and it screws up your immune system.
And how did you find out?
Methadone.
How did you how did you become aware that he was taking heroin?
I didn't know he was taking heroin. And how I found out it was, I'd be hanging out with him, and at that time, I didn't know he did heroin when he went from Vietnam. I was a naive little kid in Long Island. I didn't know anything about
And he probably didn't want you to
any
know.
of that. So, he did it I was a little kid, he probably didn't want me to know that he did that stuff because he would have felt embarrassed. Like, how could I do something that stupid? So that's probably the reason. I should have asked him, but I never asked him that question before he died.
So that takes us to, however you want to, is George getting sick.
What happened is, like I said, he was passing out. I'd be standing next to him and he just passed out, and I'd be like, your friend just passed out on the ground. I'm like, now? So every time he kept doing that. So eventually he went to the hospital and they said he had AIDS. I'm like, George, how do you have AIDS? Drug users have AIDS. He's like, I did heroin. And unfortunately, I used a dirty needle. I said to him, why would you do that type of shit? Why would you do that and put that stuff in your body when you have all this talent, all this wonderful spirits, despite what you went through? He said, I'm embarrassed by that too. Two things George was embarrassed by: that he volunteered in Vietnam, that he did heroin and dirty needles. He's like, I'm embarrassed by that. And it shows you anybody can drink the Kool-Aid. Doesn't matter how smart you are, how dumb you are. If you are weak at the time, you might drink the Kool-Aid. So that was, at that time, that's what a lot of Vietnam vets did. But that's what a lot of musicians did. Billie Holiday did heroin. A lot of blues musicians did heroin.
Yeah.
That's what they gave people back then, to help to try and, instead of having to shoot them and assassinate them, let them do it themselves. Let the CIA just watch them kill themselves. So that's the irony of all that stuff. That leads up to, the stuff we talked about before.
Yeah. So could you go?
And that makes me so angry because I wish I was old to understand any of that. I would have talked to George when he came back to Vietnam and say, you got to get your head straight because you might start doing heroin. You might get so depressed. But they took advantage of me because I was too young. The only thing I knew about Vietnam was the body counts I saw on TV with Walter Cronkite. And I didn't understand that. Because no one explained anything to me.
I think it's becoming apparent that there weren't any actual solutions to any of these things.
No.
And it seemed like even back in that time period, there wasn't any information regarding any of this,
No,
that
it
people
wasn't.
could take any steps. And I think it's coming out more with AZT, with the solutions even offered, but before we could get there, would you go into a little bit more of, because George was never able to recover his health from what you said. Could you speak upon that a bit?
No, between the, unfortunately, diet, which, was meat all the time back then, until I became a vegetarian, it was meat all the time. So obviously, they weren't aware of that. We know the meat is all crap. And it's not organic, so that, you add that, the terrible diet he ate, and the heroin. I don't know how much he did. I never saw the veins to see the heroin marks. But that's how I didn't know, because I never saw any of the shot. When you shoot up, you get.
So I was under the impression that it was he had passed from AIDS.
That's what they claim.
That's what
I think it was from AZT poisoning. I can't prove that because they wouldn't let me see the medical records when I used to visit George. The doctors and nurses would not let me see the medical records. So, but at that time, that's a very distinct possibility because that's what they gave people with AIDS.
So you were saying George was ill and he
But
had
obviously I can't prove that legally because I don't have his medical records.
George had moved home and he was living in the basement.
Yeah.
And he was ill.
Right,
And
that's when he forgot the apartment in Manhattan. He came back to live with my mother.
Yeah.
And he lost touch with all the hippies he lived with back then.
And you said so that what they were offering as a health remedy wasn't working, and you guys were looking for solutions, and there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation.
Plenty of misinformation, including the quote back then, the holistic left-wing people.
Okay.
They were pulling scams. They would just, say, oh, this works, but it's not toxic. But that didn't work either. So I go downstairs at George and see the refrigerator, and I'd be like, does any of this stuff work? It'd be like a million pills in his refrigerator.
Yeah.
All types of stuff. Stuff someone gave him that looked like wheatgrass or whatever. But no matter what he did, even trying to change his diet, nothing worked. He kept getting worse. He stopped passing out, but he started to become a skeleton.
Yeah.
His teeth started to like fall out. He started to get rush. If people don't know what that is, you get this stuff on your tongue. It looks like sores. He eventually lost so much body weight, muscle weight.
So it's very painful.
It's horrible.
And but not for me, but I just have to.
It's the worst thing to ever watch.
So you went through this with him,
no one would help him.
and no one was supporting.
Nobody.
And actually, what you mentioned, and I hate to bring
No one
this
even
in,
celebrated his birthday.
but even at the time, you see, there was shame from your mother, but that seemed to
Absolutely.
compound the.
It
Could
made
you go
it
into a
worse.
little bit about that?
Yeah. I said to my mother, "You told him to go to Vietnam. You urged him. Maybe you had not urged him to join the Marines and go to Vietnam. Maybe he would have thought differently."
But at that time, just for me to kind of bring it to that point, it seemed it was the shame of that he had AIDS that she would not acknowledge, and it had a negative. Anyway.
She was embarrassed that her son, who's supposed to be the prize of the family, the smartest, the brightest, the most outgoing, talented person in the family, has this disease that was self-inflicted. And like I said, George was a gay, so he got it through needles. And unfortunately, some scumbag, I said, if I ever met the person that gave him the heroin or dirty needle, I'd fucking kill him. I'd beat the crap out of him with anything I could find. That's how upset I get about it. So all the drug dealers that deal in drugs, any type of drugs that kill people, you're a bunch of bastards. Stop killing people by doing that. Whether you're selling legal drugs or illegal drugs.
Yeah, now
on the street or in the hospital. Whether you're Fauci's buddy or you're a street dealer for the CIA, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That is the lowest form of life, people doing that. That and child molesters. Both the same level of mentality.
Kind of brings us full circle.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. They're the same group of scumbags.
So, yeah.
And that's the other thing is.
So, we've talked about it in the past.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say is, George had so-called friend or cousin and went to Vietnam. Went to Woodstock. Didn't have to go to Vietnam. Wasn't brainwashed to go. He came over to the house in West Hempstead. So I went to meet him in West Hempstead, around there. We sat down, and George asked him if he could keep some medicine for the AIDS thing in his refrigerator, because it had to be kept freezing cold, and our refrigerator wasn't, was an old refrigerator. And he said no, and I said, why? You're his best friend. He thinks you're his best friend. And he said, oh, I don't want my neighbors to see I'm doing that. I said, well, can George come over and put it in your refrigerator? Oh, I don't want my neighbors to see. So he was embarrassed that George had AIDS.
Yeah.
And this is a fake hippie that was George's age. And I never felt such hatred, such rage. Even telling his story, I get upset. Because I just was like, you fake pretend hippie that went to Woodstock. You're embarrassed about George, and he's the one who helped me get through life. You've done nothing.
And George is dying.
And George is dying, and I can't find a cure, and I didn't know about Gary Knoll and Dr. Shakur at the time, and no one was even trying to find out anything. I'm like, he's gonna die, and it shouldn't be happening like this.
So, could you go a little bit in?
So that even to tell that story, I want to break the camera. It's fucking infuriating.
Well, you get to speak about it now to address it a bit. So George passes.
Yeah, horrible.
Would you go into talk a little bit about that and relate it to the choice of funeral?
Sure. So what happened is, just before he died, I was trying to find somebody who could prove to me they've cured it.
Cured what?
AIDS, or had any success in treating this. So I found a couple people. Because I had, at that time I was working for a publishing company, They did holistic books. So I called some of these people that they referred me to, and I found one person that said, I've cured it, but I have to come to the house. And I'm like, I can't, you can't find me, I had to find you. And I'm like, if you come to the house, my mother won't even let you in the house. She finds you're trying to help George, she'll throw you out. Because she can't even say the word AIDS. So I said, well, that's a lost cause. And she never even had a chance to see, well, was she telling the truth? Well, a lot of people back then claiming they were curing AIDS. The only one I can prove was Gary Nolan. Because he had somebody on Fauci's book in the movie that said, I had AIDS, here's my medical records, I cured it. So Gary Nolan didn't just say that, so I said, he had the Tri-State Healing Center. I didn't know about that. I would have gone there. So that's a tragedy of all that part. And what happened is when George died, I was going to North Shore just before the night he died. I went into the hospital.
That's where he was?
Yeah, before he died. That's the last days before he died.
Oh, so he passed away in North Shore.
In North Shore.
Okay.
And I told him, you were supposed to tell me if it got that bad.
So all right, so you didn't know he was in North Shore?
No, I know he was there, but I said, if he's getting to the point where he's going to die, I don't want him to die without seeing me before he dies.
Okay.
The last thing before he dies, sorry.
No, it's okay. I understand.
Upsetting. Is I want to make sure he sees my face. The last thing on this planet, I want him to see my face, so he feels good. So I went to the hospital. I said, "Where's George?" And they're like, "He died." He died. You didn't tell me. I almost cried for 2 hours. I might cry now, but it was the most horrible thing I've ever gone through. No one should go through that. I said, "You fucking bastards. I'm at a stupid job, and my best friend dies, and you don't even tell me." So before I could do anything, my other nasty brother shows up, and he has all of George's stuff. I'm like, "You've already cleaned that the apartment and stolen everything?" And he had a big bag, and I'm like, "What are you doing with George's stuff? He's stealing his stuff? His body's not even fresh yet." And he says to me, "I hate you." I'm like, "I hate your guts too." That's what you say to your brother, whose other brother just died? I mean, just thinking about it, I want to fucking break something. And that's horrible things. And then I try to find out, where's George? Oh, we buried him already. You didn't even ask me about it? You just went and buried him already? And I said, where is he buried? Oh, at Covington National Military Cemetery. And they told me they gave him a military funeral, which means 21 gun salutes. I'm like, you think that's what George wanted? You think that's my last memory? You want that to be of George to the world? That would be like giving me a military funeral.
So people who
even to the day, his last days, no respect.
Because some people may not know that people who serve in the military are offered a military funeral.
Yeah, for free. Yeah, that's the only thing that's free. But they don't tell you, well, you're free to die, you're free to drink the Kool-Aid, you're a piece of property now.
And you felt that was not what George would have wanted.
No, it's the opposite of what George would have wanted. That's like, telling John Lennon, let's bury you in a military cemetery and sing "Kill, Kill, Kill" song. That's how the opposite of what that is.
Yes.
You see pictures of George, and you've probably seen already. That's who George really was, not the military picture that you're seeing. The other pictures are who George really was. George loved the village. He loved all that stuff. That's what's so angry and so sad. That's why I think his memory should be alive.
So would
in some way, somehow.
So would you leave us off with the things the good aspects of George that you could share with us before?
One, to go through that terror his entire life till he died. I don't know how you could be a nice person. I'd be a bitter, angry bastard. I would not care about anybody else. Even my own brother, I'd be like, I got my own problems. Even in the day George was as skinny as a stick, he still said he loved me. Always cared about me. And my parents are not very loving. I don't remember them ever celebrating my birthday. George is the only one. I remember when I was, young, and I told this story, but I think it's a great story to tell again. When he was eating in the kitchen in Garden City, he said, come on, come in the kitchen, I got your birthday present. And he's like, where is it? Where is it? I'm like, where is it? It's in my pants. I'm like, just stick your hand in my pants. So I gently stuck my hand, the top of the pants, and all these quarters are in tape. So I start bringing them out. It took me like 20 minutes to take the quarters out.
Like a magician with the handkerchiefs?
It must have been $40 in quarters. I'm like, that's my birthday present? He gave me a hug. I'm like, yeah, that's your birthday present. Those things, the time he spoke to me when I was young, the time I saw him on stage, I was so proud of him when he was doing that. I was like, you went through that shit, but you learned to love people. You became who you wanted to become, no matter what anybody said. And even though everybody at the end abandoned you, I'm not going to abandon you. So my memories of like, you drive into the city, that was his happiest moments. And when I come down and you play guitar, he'd be, come on down. He played guitar for me. And George was self-taught. And that's not easy. And I'm sure in the music world, that's not easy to play. And to learn music, he never had a teacher. He said, I'm going to learn this on my own. That's very rare. Most even great musicians, they get some help. They get taught from somebody. George did it all by himself. And every day, even though he was doing that, he had to, deal with those flashbacks every day. When I walked down, I'm like, can you sleep with no lights on and no noise? Like, no, I can't. Because I think someone explained to me, like in the Cheech and Chong movie, it's like a joke. The guy's like an old Vietnam vet and he's riding a motorcycle and they got the sidecar and he thinks the lamppost is a Viet Cong. So he starts pretending to shoot the light post. He's having a flashback and he thinks he thinks Chong next to him is a Viet Cong. So he's trying to push him out of the sidecar. So in a comical way, to make a human level, people might understand, George thought that he would see things like that. He thought he saw the Viet Cong symbolize. Like the melatonin, that crappy yellow stuff didn't help him at all.
Yeah.
Not the melatonin, the yellow stuff.
The methadone.
Methadone. That didn't take nightmares away. The worst thing was, my mother would tell him, well, why don't you go to the Veterans Hospital? You can be with your own people. George hated the Veterans Hospital. He hated that crap. He didn't hang out with veterans. He didn't do any of that stuff. He didn't come back and wear his medal. He didn't wear the uniforms. I went in the basement. I stared at that locker. That was the locker that was in Vietnam. I guess he brought it home. And his uniform was in there from Vietnam. I said, the stories that locker could tell. Those boots, the stories that could tell. I remember during Afghanistan, they put the boots that have killed veterans on the steps of Union Square. I thought that was a great statement. Yeah. So I was like, I wish I had done that with George. I would have put his boots in the front lawn and said, Vietnam vet murdered by this government.
Well, you're doing maybe something a little bit more now.
I hope so. I hope this actually, people will listen to what I have to say and want to tell, listen, these war propaganda, whether it's TV, promoters of these wars, let the people that want these wars, let them go fight them. Don't give your son and children and daughters to this machine. Let them go. They like war so much, let them go. Let them come back, limbs missing, blind, deaf, legs missing, arms missing, having nightmares every night, let them go through it. Don't give up your children to this machine. The best thing you can give to your kids is love and stay away from those things. And keep them mentally well. And don't abuse your kids, because you don't know what the result of that could be. Anything can happen. Maybe you think you're ill, you're not doing well, don't take it out on your kids. And don't try and make your kids you. Once your kid is out of you, that's a separate human being. They have their own personality, they will become their own person. Don't try and think your kid's going to be you, unless that happens naturally. If you've done such a great job, they admire you. Maybe there's some things they want to be like you. But don't force it on anybody. The spirits will come together if it's really true. It's not going to be coerced to death. Oh, I have to like you because you're dad. I have to like you because you're mom. It doesn't work that way.
So, to tie it all up and take us out,
Sure.
how do you want to do that? What would you like to say?
Well, one is hopefully people will look at this, think it's a good thing. What I'm saying, when there's a protest about anything, go. Or do your own protest. It doesn't matter. I always ask George, I'm like, what do you think those hippies were doing? When they were real hippies. I said, why do you think they had all those protests not to go to Vietnam? He's like, I should have listened. I remember he had written some letters and I read them. He's like, I don't know why those people are protesting down there in California. He's like, I don't understand. Unfortunately, he understood after he got it, I'm sure. I'm sure at that point he finally got it, then it was too late. And, I was like, my parents from World War II never got any of this. They were just like, let's bury him, get it over with. I had a son, I'm embarrassed that he had AIDS, just bury him, get over with. And I'm like, that's not honoring George, just get it over with. And if your son or daughter has music ability, encourage it. Don't be like, oh, they have to be a business person and make millions. Let them be happy. That's what matters. Not they have to be you. And then finally, man, don't abuse your kids. I guess is the final thing I would say. Because your kids will be a shining example to the world. That's the last thing you can leave on this planet. But if you screw it up, don't listen, you'll pay a price. Worse than your kid will. Your kid will probably throw you in an old age home and say, I don't care. So that would be my saving grace. Last word. And thanks everybody that's making the world a better place.
Thanks, Rich.
What we're here to talk about today is the fact that the brain is and will be the 21st century battlescape in many ways. End of story.
Now it's time to present the bad news, and I apologize if my tone becomes more dark, but these are the dark sides of neurotechnologies and what governments use them for, and we have quite a few decades advanced research on the civilian scientists for obvious reasons of national defense. But let me kind of set the mood by reading a professor of psychology or neuropsychiatry at Yale Medical School, and he, in the 1960s, he did a lot of research that was quite unethical, but for the Cold War, for some reason, it was allowed, and it continues today. And I may or may not tell you stories about my personal experiences of observing the capabilities of human suffering that is allowed for weapons development. But Dr. Jose Delgado is his name, and he was kind of considered the father of brain chips. The quote is, "We need a program of psychosurgery for political control of our society. The purpose is physical control of the mind. Everyone who deviates from the given norm can be surgically mutilated. The individual may think that the most important reality is his own existence, but this is only his personal point of view. This lacks historical perspective. Man does not have the right to develop his own mind. This kind of liberal orientation has great appeal. We must electronically control the brain. Some days, armies and generals will be controlled electronically by stimulation of the brain."
What we're here to talk about today is the fact that the brain is and will be the 21st century battlescape in many ways. End of story. You will encounter some form of neurocognitive science that has been weaponized not only in your military career but in your personal and professional lives. It is valid, valuable, and already in operational play. The brain is the current and future battle space. What's new about this is the in-close nature of this. Increasingly, we're not seeing these things as weapons of mass destruction against gross aspects of the population. More specifically, perhaps, might be targeting individuals on a level that allows either direct attribution or covert engagement with non-attribution. Formal definition of a weapon, probably the one that you've heard about most recently, most contemporaneously in the literature, is the possibility to use some form of directed energy to affect physiology peripherally and also to affect the physiology and health of the brain.
If you're targeting demonstrators, you make them suicidally depressed, and they don't care about demonstrating anymore because they're too upset. With one pulse frequency, you can just make people so suicidal they can't be bothered to act like a demonstrator anymore. All they want to do is sleep or lay in bed all day.
I can disrupt an individual from the level of their cell to their system, and disrupt individuals on a variety of levels, from individuals all the way up to the social fabric. Target a specific individual, change or eliminate that individual with very little attribution and trace, and be able to leave prior to any attribution. Case in point here, U.S. Embassy personnel in Havana and possibly in China. Clearly, one of the things we can also do is transcranial neuromodulation, the idea of going through the skull to modulate the node and network activity of the brain, to implant certain brain-machine interfaces. These are many of the DARPA programs that you may hear of now. Probably the one that is most notorious is something called the N3 program, which is the non-invasive neurosurgical neuromodulation program being run by their program manager, Dr. Al Mundy. The idea here is to put minimal-sized electrodes in a network within a brain through only minimal intervention to be able to read and write into the brain function in real time, remotely. And by affecting the way that brain is built and the way it functions, influence in ways that are kinetic and non-kinetic. The attitudes, beliefs, thoughts, emotions, activities. Look at the power that understanding, tools, techniques, the brain sciences afford.
We are wondering what is happening to the world. Everything is changing.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change. Our bodies will be so high-tech we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
Inside our own heads is the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe.
You might ask yourself, can we get to be superhumans?
B times C times D equals R, which means biological knowledge multiplied by computing power multiplied by data equals the ability to hack humans. R. B times C times D equals R. Which means biological knowledge multiplied by computing power multiplied by data equals the ability to hack humans. R. B times C times D equals R. Which means biological knowledge multiplied by computing power multiplied by data equals the ability to hack humans. R.
Lurking beneath the surface of civilization, lurking beneath the surface of civilization, lurking beneath the surface of civilization.
What was needed was a new elite who could manage what he called the bewildered herd. What was needed was a new elite who could manage what he called the bewildered herd.
We are in a new Cold War, and this is why countries are developing this. I mean, really developing this. And this is why all of the microwave transmitters are going up everywhere. Because somebody, if they wanted to, could use them for other effects.
Equals the ability to hack humans. R. Equals the ability to hack humans. R. Equals the ability to hack humans. R.
The system is up and running.
MIT was awarded a number of years ago to Woody Norris. This is 2005 or 2006. And that award was $500,000 for doing what's called acoustic heterodyning, being able to send a signal from 2 points into an individual so they literally hear a voice in their head that nobody around them hear.
I mean, voices are the easiest ones because all you have to do is stimulate the cochlea with a set resonant frequency. It's very easy. Voices are very easy. And it isn't people imagining voices, they physically hear them. You can physically make people hear voices, certain voices, and it can be any conversation, and it can be anybody you want to hear. It can be a soft, angelic voice, it can be a god, it could be something that scares you like a devil, it could be anything.
DARPA let a couple of contracts back in 2011, 2012 to the University of California for what's called electronic telepathy, being able to monitor the brain activity of human beings at a distance and determine what they're thinking. And then on a second contract, actually developing complex signals, being able to send them into the brain of another person, literally transmit a message. This is where the technology is today.
We're now in the early stages of the fourth industrial revolution, which is bringing together digital, physical, and biological systems.
One of the features of this fourth industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
Ability to hack humans.
With the ability to visualize brain activity, for example, through a simple consumer-based EEG device.
Equals the ability to hack humans.
It gives us access to ourselves in ways that we've never before thought possible. It unlocks the black box that is the brain.
Equals the ability to hack humans.
How then can we use these elements as weapons? Means of contending against others. Formal definition of a weapon, right out of the Oxford Old English Dictionary. Means of contending against others. And we can do that in a number of ways. We can militate their behaviors and their thoughts in some ways as to make them more amenable to what we do, the idea of positive weaponology. Or we can in fact mitigate, and in some cases completely nullify, their capability, will, or engagement to fight. If we combine those two definitions into one, what we find is those agents that will either change individuals' thoughts, vulnerabilities, volatility to violence and aggression, or incur morbidity, dysfunction, and or mortality in such a way as to then mitigate the engagement altogether. You still with me? That said, we can break down any form of weaponology into two discrete categories: soft weapons and hard weapons. In the former categorization, soft weapons include but are not limited to such things like economic leveraging to create economics, market values, market presence at international bargaining tables to develop international power and leverage as a soft weapon. Clearly, the more we're able to make an impact in a field, in a dimension, by virtue of research, medicine, technology, infiltration to a variety of areas of the public space, the more we're able to yield economic strong-arming, economic leveraging. I think an important consideration that I'll reiterate later in this particular lecture is that there are countries outside the United States and or the West that are increasing their capabilities by intent in the brain sciences so as to be able to gain this type of economic leveraging in international global markets, in medicine, science, technology, and the military.
There's now a scientific foundation for the effects of mindfulness on the brain.
So, how then can we use these elements as weapons?
On the genome, on biological aging.
So, how then can we use these elements as weapons?
When the human mind does know itself, then you get the potential for a new renaissance.
So,
that restructures itself in terms of our relationship to life, our relationship to the planet, our relationship to work.
So, how then can we use these elements as weapons?
We need a different economic model. And by that I don't mean capitalism versus communism.
So, how then can we use these elements as weapons?
What I'm talking about is a shift in the system along the lines of the two big changes that happened in the 20th century, Keynesianism with a much greater focus on health and education.
So, how then can we use these elements as weapons?
And the role of government working with business, and then a reaction against that in late century.
So, how then can we use these elements as weapons?
To neoliberalism, where the focus was on free markets, freedom of the individual, and getting governments out of the way.
So, how then can we use these elements as weapons?
We need a shift to a new system that will allow us to meet the basic needs of every human on the planet.
Whereas in the past, humans has had to struggle against exploitation. In the 21st century, the really big struggle will be against irrelevance. And it's much worse to be irrelevant than to be exploited.
Well, that last sentence, I think, is a great place to start. The worse to be irrelevant than exploited. Well, I think what that really means is that in order to avoid being irrelevant, you will have to submit to exploitation. So if the difference before was between the unexploited and the exploited, now it's versus exploited and useless, right? So is it better to be, it's better to be exploited than irrelevant. So this is a way of getting people to be like, well, if those are our only choices, I guess I'll go with exploited, because I certainly don't want to be part of the useless, irrelevant class.
That will live within planetary means, that will be fairer, and that will be focused as its key goal, not on growth per se, but on maximizing human well-being. And
those who fail in the struggle against irrelevance would constitute a new useless class. People who are useless, not from the viewpoint of their friends and family, of course, but useless from the viewpoint of the economic and political system. And this useless class will be separated by an ever-growing gap from the ever more powerful elite.
Lurking beneath the surface of civilization, lurking beneath the surface of civilization, lurking beneath the surface of civilization.
What was needed was a new elite who could manage what he called the bewildered herd. What was needed was a new elite who could manage what he called the bewildered herd. What was needed was a new elite who could manage what he called the bewildered herd.
And history tells us that a value shift is triggered by creation of a new story about how we want to live.
That was a big slogan. That was a big slogan. That was a big slogan. We work to make the world safe for democracy. That was a big slogan. That was a big slogan. That was a big slogan.
I see the circular economy as something which fits very closely with mankind's goal to be innovative and creative and to always progress. We can use asset tracking, we can use IT, we can use 3D printing to enable this different economic model to recover materials, feed them back into the economy, and really to decouple growth from the resource constraints we have.
So, how then can we use these elements as weapons?
The AI revolution might create unprecedented inequality, not just between classes, but also between countries.
So, how then can we use these elements as weapons?
Raindrops on roses, whiskers on kittens, bright copper kettle, warm woolen mittens, brown paper packages tied up with strings. These are a few of my favorite things. Cream-colored ponies and crisp apple strudels, doorbells and sleigh bells and schnitzel with noodles, wild geese that fly with the moon on their wings. These are a few of my favorite things. Girls in white dresses with blue satin sashes, snowflakes that stay on my nose and my lashes, silver white winters that melt into spring. These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, simply remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so
So here's an example of what I'm talking about. When I left, I thought it was for life. I knew I couldn't endure another beating. No longer would I have to endure the beating and menace of a bigoted, close-minded bully and his demented partner in child abuse. My story begins when I was 15 years old. My family life couldn't handle it anymore. I made a decision. It was time to leave home and look for a safe haven. That straw hat finally broke the camel's back, and almost mine, occurred late one cold February night. My father started a fight with me that quickly grew physical. I ran outside to escape his wrath. He locked the door behind me. What he didn't know was that two of my friends were still in the house. While sneaking them out the basement window, my father thought it was me coming in and attacked them with a chair. We all just barely escaped with nothing but our teenage pride damage. So he decided at 15, his family was not useful anymore. So he decided, well, there must be something better, but there wasn't. In the end, he never made it to Boys Town.